I guess, from the frying pan into the fire. You know, you had a politician with a microphone. Now you have a bureaucrat with a microphone up here. And no PowerPoint. So you guys are really in trouble. So let me start off by saying a couple of things here. One is I want to say thank you to TechWire and to Cal Innovates for hosting this session. In a way, I feel like the speakers were up here really preaching to the choir. Most of you, I believe, are in technology, right? In some form or fashion. Most of the time, we're the ones driving for change, I think, especially in large organizations and within government. I don't know if it's so much in the private sector side, but at least in government, how many of you that are in the technology space feel like you're the ones out there saying, hey, we got to change the way we're doing business, right? So in a way, we are up here preaching to the choir. But having said that, I think the Lieutenant Governor and actually all of the speakers do bring up some really good points. And I really, believe it or not, appreciated his presentation and the challenge that he laid out before us. Because he pointed out some things that are very true and that we need to acknowledge and we have to address if we really are to foster innovation in government. I think the whole focus on, it's not just about, you know, investing in technologies or harnessing the power of them. It's a changing of the culture of government and of any large organization and bureaucracy that's ultimately going to drive innovation. I think that is spot on. That is very true. I think Carl said it, and a couple of the other speakers said it as well. One of the things that we have to get over, one of our biggest hurdles, is fear. And it's fear of change, and more importantly, it's the fear of failure and fear of accountability when something doesn't go right. The Lieutenant Governor pointed out how many systems, how many projects, even the private sector, come in that are on time and on budget. And how are those looked at in the private sector, and what's the difference between that and the public sector? It was really gratifying to hear about him saying, you know, when things turn out that way, that he's going to be there to help us. Because we've had, as he pointed out, some situations here in California where projects really haven't turned out that way. But what was the response of the leadership? What was the response of the legislature or the media? It wasn't, hey man, we got your back, right? I mean, I was in a couple of those hearings, especially the one in the controller's office, most recently the EDD hearings. You don't have to see too many leaders step in there and say, hey, we got your back. You know, this happens all the time. And guess what? The systems will ultimately work. So it is refreshing to see leaders like the Lieutenant Governor, like Senator Padilla, that are here that do get it and that acknowledge there is going to be some hiccups along the way. But we have to accept those if we want innovation and if we want change. Having said all of that, really what I wanted to talk to you about is, okay, now we've heard about the need for innovation. We've heard of what's happening in the private sector. We've heard of what's happening at the local government sector. Can it happen at the state government? You know, and I guess what I'm here to tell you is, in spite of what you heard, innovation does actually happen and is happening here in the state of California. Now, you know, it may not look exactly what it would look like over in the private sector, but it is happening. But what I want to talk to you about is, what does it look like? Does it happen in the state government? And how can we make sure that it continues to happen? I think one of the first things that we have to do is we have to acknowledge that there are some differences between the public sector and the private sector. You know, really it's kind of a basic, but in reality, those differences can be very, very different and very telling and can have a significant impact on the level and the pace of innovation. So first and foremost, let's compare the private sector and the public sector. One of the things that really, you know, to me was kind of an eye-opener was that we that are in the public sector, especially those of us at the state government level, don't have the built-in competition that you have in the private sector, right? Competition, I think, is good. It spurs innovation, it spurs change, and it incents folks to make things better, to change your business models to be more effective and efficient. We at the public sector, for the most part, really don't have competition. You know, folks don't have the option of going and saying, hey, I don't like the way California issues permits, I'll go to Idaho. I'll go to New Jersey. I'll go to Texas and ask them to issue me a building permit. They might move their business, they might relocate, but that's really a pretty significant life change for a lot of folks. The other difference that we have with the private sector is that for the most part, we have customers that I would say 99% of the time don't really want to be our customers. They just don't have a choice. Think about, we had Selby Stanislaus over here today. She talked about her customers, right? People that pay taxes. How many of you here really love being a customer of the franchise tax board? Let me see a show of hands. Come on, we need the money. It's good for the state. Most of our customers don't want to be customers. And it's not just the taxpayers. It's folks that are in unemployment, folks that are applying for benefits, folks that have experienced a flood or some sort of natural disaster. Most of the time when our customers come to us, they don't necessarily want to be our customers. That makes a big difference in the way that we interact with our customers. Here's an example of it. You're a customer, you want to, let's say you lose your job, you need to apply for benefits, or you need to pay your income taxes. So we, unlike Amazon, we don't ask just the basics. We want to know a lot of information from you. We want to know, okay, what's your name? What's your marital status? Are you married? Do you have kids? What are their names? What are their social security numbers? What are your wife's social security number? Your husband's social security number? Where do you work? Where do you bank? Where do you keep your money? Who's your employer? Where do you live? We collect a lot of information, and if you're applying for some of our other programs, we may ask you information about what's your health status. Do you have any diseases? Have you adopted kids? You have foster kids? How long have they lived with you? How old are they? A lot of very sensitive information that we collect. So that places a little bit of a difference. First of all, folks don't want to be our customers. They don't necessarily want to give us that information, but we make them give it to us in order to interact with government. So it really changes the dynamic of what you can and can't do with that information. The Lieutenant Governor was talking about the cloud. California is in the cloud. We're moving into the cloud very rapidly, but we do have to move a little bit gingerly. Security may not be a big deal when you have 3 people on your staff, or if you don't necessarily collect that sort of information. I guarantee you, if you're the Franchise Tax Board, or if you're the Employment Development Department, or you're the Bureau of Vital Statistics, or the Office of AIDS, or the Department of Social Services, you have to be very, very careful with what you do with people's information once it gets there. Here's another significant difference between us and the private sector. There really is no budget for R&D in the public sector. I know it's going to shock you to hear that, but we don't have a set-aside to go out and do research and development. And what's worse, we don't really have a lot of tolerance for failure. R&D is all about trial and error. Finding what's going on and then figuring it out and making it work. Right? What's new? Does it work? Most of the time there's failure there. There really is not much of a tolerance for failure in the public sector. So that's another challenge that we have to deal with. And then finally, I think one of the biggest challenges is that we don't have necessarily a single decision maker in government. Not even the governor. Not a state CIO, not a departmental CIO, not even Selby Stanislaus. Right? We don't get to make the decisions all by ourselves. We have citizenry to account for. We have policymakers in the legislature to account for. We have organizations that manage the state budget. And we have to go through a whole series of decision makers in order to make something happen and to move something. And we also have an entrenched bureaucracy, let's say, some of the inertia that happens. So how do we go about making innovation and happen in government? I think there are a couple of steps that we need to do. I also have a 5-step process. Carl shared with you his 5 lessons. I had 5 steps that I wanted to share with you. So let me start with the first step. The first step is by doing exactly what we're doing today, what some of the speakers say. We have to acknowledge the fact that we cannot continue to do things the way that we have been doing it. Why? Because they don't work. We heard several examples today of how business models have transformed. The Lieutenant Governor was just talking about that, right? What's happened to the entertainment industry? What's happened to the music industry? What's happening to the taxi industry? Same sort of thing is happening in government. We have to look at how do people function and do their business nowadays, and we have to look at the way government functions today. So the first step is to look at what we're doing and understand that it doesn't work, and it has to change. Here's a couple of examples, and this is just a personal example of my own. It just happened to me this last weekend for Thanksgiving. So I went out of town. I went to visit in-laws over in the Midwest, and I have a son who's off in college, another son whose wife and he live in the Bay Area, and the plan is we're all going to converge at my sister-in-law's house in Chicago. So I thought about it after the fact, and I thought, how did I go about getting myself and my family there and planning the whole trip? And it was all through technology. technology, and it was markedly different the way I did it this time than if I had done this 10, 15 years ago. Everything from flight reservations, car rental reservations, even dinner reservations, we did that online. Getting directions from the airport, because, I've been to her house once or twice, but she lives outside of Chicago. I don't really know Chicago all that well. So I leveraged technology to find the directions from the airport to her house. I have a daughter who wasn't able to join us because she's in Europe. So on Thanksgiving morning, I didn't call her up. We got on the little tablet device and we Skyped. My son, who's in college, brought his homework with him, and he brought a laptop to do his homework. At one point, we're in the middle of doing something, and it always happens, right? Your wife says, "Oh, shoot, we need paprika," or whatever it was for the. So, guess we got to go to the grocery store, right? So I went to the grocery store to pick stuff up. And then while I was at the grocery store, I received a text, "Oh, don't forget to get X, Y, and Z." So even the shopping list was done through technology. And then when I got back to the house, we had a great meal and everything. And so I thought, okay, great. Dallas Cowboys are playing, my favorite team. I'm going to get to go watch them. So right before they're about to kick off, my wife and my in-laws come in. They all go into the family room and decide, hey, we're going to do a board game. So I turn on the TV. So I'm like, really? Now? In the middle of the Cowboys game? So luckily, I had my trusty little mobile phone. So I'm sitting here playing the game, and I did participate. We did turn off the TV, but I had it right there. Well, I watched it right before halftime when we started to actually play. But the point was, the way we did things, everything from communicating, getting ourselves over there, finding our directions, going to the grocery stores, talking to my daughter over in Morocco, all those sorts of things we did through technology, and it's very different than the way we've done things in the past. I've used this example before. My son, I told you, he's in college. He called me up because he needed something, and he needed to find something where he's in school. So I told him, well, look it up in the Yellow Pages.
Yellow Pages?
I said, the Yellow Pages. Well, what's the Yellow Pages? And I thought he was messing with me. So I started to get mad at him, and I realized, you know what? I'm thinking, from the 20th century, this 21st century kids, they don't even use Yellow Pages. I don't even use Yellow Pages anymore. So I said Skype it or Google it, and go on Bing, and he found it right away. But it's a very different way of doing things. So the first step is recognize the way we've done things in the past is different than the way we're doing things today. So government has to change its business model. Second step is to pay attention to the trends, and especially the trends in technology. So, the Lieutenant Governor talked about the digital divide. I think somebody asked him a question. It's a very real situation here in California. But on the other hand, California is also one of the most tech-savvy and computer-literate states in the country. In fact, I think it is. We have something like on the order of 30 million people that are internet users. We have 91% of the adults in California that own a mobile device, whether a tablet, smartphone, or a cell phone. And, I was just looking at the trends here. So, online shopping statistics. Last year, we in California spent about $288 billion in commerce that was transacted online. So if you're in government, you have to watch that. You have to look at those trends and say, okay, people are becoming more mobile, they're becoming used to doing things online and having things accessible to them on a 24/7 basis. So that means we as government have to figure out how do we change that as well. The other thing that we have to look at is, okay, how do those statistics actually play out? How do those breakouts play out? So there's a difference, for example, in who owns tablets versus who owns mobile phones and smartphones. If you look at the demographics, it's the younger set that really owns the smartphones. Tablet devices are all people like us, mostly like us, in their 30s to early 50s. A couple of you don't qualify. That was a joke. No, I know there's a couple of young people out there. Most of you are under 50, I'm sure. Nevertheless, it means we have to reach out to consumers of government services where they're at on a mobile platform. So Gavin had it right. It's all about mobile, right? That should be on the top of your list, and it is for California. So we're moving things into the mobile platform. Sitting over here, Scott Patterson, our head of our e-services office. So California, a couple of years ago, was the first state to move into to create its own mobile gallery. So our own mobile apps space, and we're moving departments into putting more services, not only online, but to make them accessible in a mobile platform, services and transactions. So now, some of the more recent ones you may have seen a little bit of press on was this app that we released recently, is finding farmers markets, right? There's a whole big movement around farm to fork. So now you can go online for free, get one of our mobile apps, and it'll tell you, no matter where you are in California, where the farmers markets are, or traffic conditions, or a number of different things along the way. The other thing that we can do, this is step number 3 towards innovation, is to crowdsource. Crowdsource innovation. And we've done that, and we've done it in a limited format, but we have done that. Gavin was talking about open data, putting data out there. I wish he would have checked our geo portal that we launched at the beginning of this year. We launched it this year. It's gotten national awards for this effort. But essentially, what we did is we did exactly what he was talking about. We went out to the state agencies, and not just state agencies, local and federal agencies, and said, okay, what GIS data do you have? We did a poll, and we found that there's something like 11,000 data sets, over 11,000 data sets of California, GIS information about California, all kinds of different areas. The problem, as he pointed out, though, is nobody knew about it. So what we did is we consolidated it, we put it online, and made it available for free. And so now we're offering it to consumers, to entrepreneurs, to the citizens, to other governments, to say, okay, the data's here, it's available, it's yours, it's free. What can you do with it? Innovate. How can you leverage this to serve not only your own interests, but also serve government and the citizens that are out there? I think also you have to recognize, if you're in government, that technology really can be transformative. He's pointed it out, how it's transformed a couple of different lines of business. Here's an example that I like to use only because I think it really shows that the way that consumers consume information or technology or do business really can transform a whole industry. So, any of you familiar with a TV show called Arrested Development? Okay, so it's a pretty funny show, right? So what's interesting about this show, it was on from 2:04 to about 2:06. Then it went off the air. But it gained a huge following primarily through people watching it online, right? And so as a result of that, in 2011, I think, or no, 2012, they brought it back. Netflix went out and said, you know what, we've gotten so many hits on this show that we're going to commission a new set of, they brought the cast back together and they retaped and launched a new season. The difference is it's only available online through Netflix. Well, nowadays I'm sure you can get it on other sources, but you don't get it on any of the network channels. You have to go on Netflix. And they're talking about making a movie out of this thing now. So the way people consume their entertainment transformed the way Hollywood is producing it. And you're seeing that all over the place. There's a new series. I'm a big Star Trek fan, and especially the original series. Do you know that there's now phase 2 of the original series available online? Any of you watch it? It's called Star Trek Phase 2. What they did is they basically took new actors, put them in the roles of the traditional Kirk, Scott, Sulu, all those guys, and they filmed a bunch of episodes. They're available online. I don't know how it's going, but I haven't watched it because, I don't know, there's only one guy that can really play Mr. Spock, in my opinion. So I taught myself to watch it, but I know it's available. So I think in government, one of the things that we have to recognize is the power of technology to be transformative. Step 3, I think, is to set strategic goals. So he had it absolutely right. We do have to set out markers. We have to set out goals and policies that say we're going to leverage technology to enhance the way we interact with government's consumers, to make government available to them at their convenience and at their pace of speed, really on their platform. So I wanted to share with you just a couple of the goals, the strategic goals that are included in our strategic plan. Interestingly enough, our very first goal is to make government more accessible and make it mobile. Right? That's been in place for a couple of years now. That's our policy, and we're trying to drive departments towards that. Secondly, the whole issue of the cloud and building the infrastructure. One of our goals is to make sure that you have a reliable and available IT infrastructure. That's why we're putting infrastructure in the cloud. It's not an RFI, it's an actual RFP that we're very close to actually awarding that. Why? Well, because if you shut down our computers, if you shut down our technology, you shut down government today. That's the way it works today. So we have to leverage the availability and the reliability of the cloud. Although I will point out, even that is not all that secure and reliable. We have, for example, our email in the cloud. Just about a month ago, we had a major outage of our cloud email system. And it went on for several hours, and you should have seen government scramble. So as government, yeah, we want to leverage the cloud. We are going to leverage the cloud. We're doing that now. But you also have to be very strategic about that. You can't just go out and say, okay, everything in the cloud right now today. You do have security and privacy to consider, and you have to have the reliability of the infrastructure. So we are in the cloud. We're moving even faster and further into the cloud. And the whole purpose of that is to foster innovation, to take the burden from the CIOs, from the IT departments, of dealing with the mundane, the infrastructure part of it, and free them up to focus on the business-oriented, the business-centric, and more importantly, the consumer-centric parts of technology. And then lastly, I think we do have to address and acknowledge the digital divide. So one of the other interesting differences between us and the private sector is not only do the customers have no choice about being our customers, we have no choice but to serve customers, right? As government, you are obligated to serve all of the constituents, whether they're connected or not, whether they have access to broadband availability or not, whether they're technology literate or not. And believe it or not, there are still very large parts and pockets of California that don't have access to technology. Now, it's not all geographic. Some of it is, right? The rural areas have a terrible time getting access to broadband connectivity. Some of it is cultural, right? You can put stuff online, but in California, we have a very diverse demographic citizenry. Some of it is let's say, demographic from age and income levels. Right? There are certain social economic groups that just do not have access to technology the way everybody else does. And then finally, what do you do about folks that have disabilities? Or folks like my parents that are aged, and it doesn't matter if they were in the middle of Silicon Valley with all the greatest and latest technology. They don't get it, they're not going to use it. They're in their 80s. So we have to address that digital divide. So our office has created a couple of offices specifically focused on that. One is an office focused specifically on making sure that there's broadband availability throughout the state, making sure that there's digital literacy across the different markets of California, the different demographics of California. And we do that in partnership with the private sector. Then the other office is the Office of Digital Education. Again, forming partnerships to make sure that from our very youngest to our oldest folks are able to access technology. Having said all of that, I think their innovation is happening and it is possible. And I think, the challenges that we hear today, whether it's from the entrepreneurs that say, hey, we want to do a better job of interacting with government, we want to be able to provide or develop apps and provide them to you, or develop technology and provide them to you, or our policymakers who say our policy, our legislation, our strategy has to align with what's going on out in the real world. We need all of those partnerships. So I'm here to tell you from the office, from this administration, from the Department of Technology, we're embracing innovation. We're fostering it. We are careful. I'm not going to deny that. The issue of information security and personal privacy is a very important one and a very significant one to us. So we are trying to be careful in terms of how quickly we embrace technologies, especially technologies that, they've been around a couple of years, but certain things have to still mature. It's not always necessarily all about the technology. It's the business models. It's the policy models. We had a situation, again, not long ago, where we outsourced the care and feeding of some of our sensitive data, which was lost. Okay, so how do you handle that? How do you, in the government sector, you have to be held accountable. There's no escaping accountability. How do you deal with those situations? There are some things that we still have to figure out. But I think in partnership, we can still get there. So I know we're running really late. I will only close with these thoughts here. Innovation is possible. Innovation in government is certainly the way to go. There's a couple of things to do. One is you have to set strategic goals. You have to make it safe and actually necessary to foster change, because, you know, bureaucracy is reluctant to change. We have to recognize that things have changed for our consumers, and we have to approach government and the way that we interact with government from the consumer perspective. I think the issue of not looking at it from a top-down perspective is spot on. We have to align our strategies as well as our policies, whether it's legislative or policies, you know, that are administrative in nature. And then finally, we have to build up the workforce and build up the capacity in the state IT workforce in order to be able to deliver on that innovation and that promise, and form partnerships with our private sector partners. So I want to thank you. I know we're running way late, so
if we can do some rapid fire, Carlos?
sure.
Hi, Carlos, Kevin O'Connor, Appalachia again. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but there's been a lot of
Fire
talk.
away already. I'm used to it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about procurement, and so making it better. You know, finding ways to improve procurement. So one thing I don't hear much is plans are on the table to change it, and just to create an example, at Appalachia, we created the Park and Rec app, showed it to the city, they adopted it. Why can't we just simply develop something and bring it to the state level and have it, you know, fast-paced the same sort of way?
Sure. So you can. First of all, you can. Agencies do get unsolicited proposals all the time. And in fact, we're trying to facilitate that. One of the things that we did, I neglected to mention it, specifically in the mobile app space, is we've created a template that said departments use this template. Everything that you do should look like this template. And it's primarily to make it easier for consumers. You know, it works across platforms. It can work on an iOS. It can work on Android. It can work even on a BlackBerry device. And it leverages certain common functionalities. But we made that available for free. It's online. As a developer, as a state agency, or as a local agency, or anybody else, you can go and download the template. There's videos and training resources on there so that you can develop an app and make it usable, like basically out of the box usable for state agencies. In the area of reform, thank you for asking about procurement. I neglected to mention one of the things that happened is in July, my agency inherited IT procurement, especially for the large IT projects. So we're hosting a forum on December 18th. It'll be right here in Rancho Cordova at our training center. You can go on our website and see the details on it, where we're going to ask the bidding community to come together and tell us, what don't you like about our procurements? What specifically should we change? And we're going to do it by posing a series of questions. How do we make it shorter? How do we remove the obstacles that keep you from bidding? You know, how do we factor in vendor accountability? You know, we're going to ask specifically for your ideas and thoughts on how do we do that. And then we're going to go and implement it. So there is a significant number of efforts, or a significant amount of effort on IT procurement. Okay, thank you very much.